Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. My name is Laura Baker, and with me today I have Chris Bonatti. And today we're going to talk about what the heck is an email record and why should I care? I'm going to do a little bit more formal introduction of Chris in a minute, but I'm going to first talk about why we came up with this topic, and you might be in the same boat that CyberWyoming was in. So first, a little bit about CyberWyoming. We don't sell hardware, software, or technology implementation services. We are a nonprofit organization that is statewide, and our mission is to educate small business leaders and the IT workforce that surround this. So what's the story behind this webinar? IECA is owned by Chris Bonatti, and he's a longtime CyberWyoming member, and he's here as the expert of this subject matter. And at the February semi-annual members meeting, during the "What have you been seeing in our communities" discussion, Chris mentioned that securing email was something a lot of small businesses needed help with and didn't really understand. And I thought, oh yeah, that's us at CyberWyoming. So that's where we are today. And it led us down this journey, and I'm going to share our journey with you and then have Chris help us translate that to what it might mean to you and your company. So this is Chris, and he's the founder and president of IECA. He was around and in the same building when Secure Socket Layer SSL was developed. He was instrumental in TLS development. He's a consulting engineer and a small business advocate. He has 25 plus years of experience. He's a longtime supporter of CyberWyoming, so thank you for that, Chris. And he has been a great translator for me on this techie stuff that I don't understand. And so I think that he will be able to help you translate it today as well. But before he actually comes on and talks about himself a little bit, I'm going to share with you what he recommended we do at CyberWyoming before we talk to him. There's this program out there called learndmark.com. It's a website. And in this members meeting, Chris suggested that we review learndmark.com and determine if we wanted to recommend it to some of our small businesses that we work with. And so we did. And we use CyberWyoming as an example of this learndmark.com. And you can see up here in the upper left, this is the actual URL. And all you have to do is send an email to this address. You copy and paste it, and they will. It's waiting for the incoming email, and it will start your journey of learning what this DMARC is. And so at first it was fine. Everything looked good. It was getting through the connection parameters. Everything was blue on the SPF record. And we're going to explain actually what these records are and what DMARC is when Chris comes on, because I actually didn't know. I didn't know what these were. I was having to Google what they actually meant. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of us out there. And it started looking okay, but then I saw the soft fail and I thought, well, fail, that's not good, right? What does that mean? And when I talked to Chris, he explained that a little bit more, and he'll explain that today too. And then, so it passed the DKIM record, which.
Hi, may I speak with Kristen, please?
Oh, Annette, would you mind muting it?
Good. I received your payment back, and I don't really understand what, you're getting close. I say you're getting really, really.
All right, I muted her. Sorry about that, everybody. I don't think she knew that she was not muted. So we got to the DKIM and I was passed. I wasn't sure about this soft fail, but it was blue. So I thought, well, maybe it's not that important. And then I got down to the DMARC, and we got down here, and it kept going. And all of a sudden, I kind of freaked out a little bit because it said it was passed, but this was red and this was red. And I thought, okay, what does this mean? And I freaked out a little bit. And so, of course, the first thing I did was I knew I needed some help. And And so Chris came along and he helped me. And he explained what DMARC, DKIM, and SPF are and why they are or aren't crucial for email security, because I found this stuff pretty daunting. I mean, tech really goes for a lot of different acronyms, and they don't always explain those acronyms very well. So Chris, would you come on and just kind of explain what these acronyms are and what they have to do with email, and are they important for email security? Are they not important?
Sure, I'm happy to speak. The SPF, the Sender Policy Framework, is, I think, the most important of the things here is a framework for allowing recipients of email to determine whether it was properly sent. So sending organizations register a record that indicates what the legitimate source points for email from their domain are. And that, that allows you to easily ascertain, well, did this come from a correct server? Not necessarily that it's a correct email or it hasn't been tampered with or hasn't been disclosed, but at least that it came from someplace that you expect it to be coming from. And that is a very important thing. It's been around for quite some time. This, it originated really in the early O's, and it's graduated to a fairly strong level of standardization already, and has widespread acceptance, I'll say. The second of these is a different sort of thing, a different sort of mechanism completely. Go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just going to say, so the SPF record it's important to know what server it came from, but it's not infallible for security. Just to
right.
Okay. So go ahead.
It addressed one big problem, which was traffic injection. People were getting a lot of bogus email injected through untrusted servers, and it would come out saying it's come from this origin and this route. And not only was the originator bogus, but the server it came from was bogus as well. And the average recipient wouldn't be able to track that down very well. It was down to IP addresses. So the second mechanism that came into here was DKIM, or Domain Keys Identified Mail. We just say DKIM. That came in slightly later than SPF, and its objective was really to validate the origin cryptographically and provide some integrity over the message. So the idea was, we don't need a whole digital signature to come from an originator to prove that the message is valid. What we need is a simpler signature method that uses a key assigned to the server. So the server takes care of the complexity for you. When you send the message, it signs the message with the key assigned to that domain. And there are mechanisms provided to include these things in the header of the message and to provide the key in the domain record in the DNS. And that has broadly worked out pretty well too, I would say. There's a provision for matching the origin domain that is asserted against the domain that is that actually where you looked up the key. And there are some ways to qualify it in the DNS to make it work pretty well. The third mechanism, which is I would characterize as relatively recent, although it's been in action for a long time, it's not as well standardized, which is DMARC. DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. And it's a mechanism by which mail originating organizations can express a preference, policies and preferences for message validation and disposition. So what you're saying is, as an ascending organization, you're saying, here's what I want you to do when you get a bad email that claims it's from me. That's okay. That's first of all, a little bit dodgy for small businesses, because the some of the mechanisms that they specify are, well, send me a notification every time you get a bad email. Okay, well, I don't know about you guys, but my small business does not have a person designated to do anything with such notifications, and it's not likely to in the near future. Secondarily, there's nothing you can generally do about it. If someone is out there spoofing your domain, short of getting the FBI involved or something, which is unlikely, there isn't any action I can take as a small business owner to really solve that problem. Yeah, there's a presumption with the mechanism there that you will solve that problem. And I think that's kind of difficult. So, as Laura mentioned, there's one thing that DMARC does is it ties into the checking of DKIM and SPF and elevates those things to a higher prominence, I guess. And that aspect of it is good. The rest of it, maybe not so good.
So, a lot of these are based on servers, but a lot of us in small business world don't host our own email servers anymore. So we're kind of at the whim of, whoever's hosting our email. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that could put us between a rock and a hard spot?
Yeah, it is a big problem. Google Mail, Gmail, is actually one of the big hotspots because so many people use it. And when Google emits email on your behalf, they emit it under their domain. And that can create a problem because, the example that you showed earlier, the domains don't match. When the recipient looks at that and it says CyberWyoming, you're telling them it's CyberWyoming. Google and a lot of other providers will come up and say, no, that came from our domain, and it doesn't relate. But
so because it's not matching, is that why more people are bouncing back today since Google and Yahoo have upped their game?
Well, there's another aspect there, which is a lot of providers are starting to require you to turn these services on. And that's probably why a lot of you are interested in this topic, because your mail can get bounced by recipient domains if it doesn't carry at least an SPF and a DKIM record. DMARC has not advanced that far. I think that they're demanding DMARC. But SPF has been affecting people for some time. And I think Yahoo, Google, somebody else too, they're all requiring it to be there.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the next question I was going to ask you is, I've seen messages about Yahoo about bouncing back, and it seems like it'll bounce back one day and then you wait 3 days and you send it again and it doesn't bounce back. Do you have it's just because they have lots of different email servers, or? Probably.
They may have made a change to DNS records in that time too, which might have corrected a problem that was latent before. But almost all of these large services have a multitude of email servers working in clusters. And so there's a long list of servers that your message might go through, either outgoing or incoming. And so you get a different experience when you send one message versus the next.
Mm-hmm. We were just working with somebody who is having email bounce back problems and sharing some of these experiences with them. And I noticed that you can do like a DKIM record generator, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
What are those, and are they safe?
They're safe enough, I think. The mainly the issue is the key. You want to preferably generate the key someplace on your side, taking the key then and packaging that into a DKIM record is actually pretty straightforward. That's just an encoding process. And yes, you can do that safely. A lot of times it's your provider that's using the generator. It's your ISP or your web hoster that provides your email. And that's fine because they're going to have access to the key. If that's the entity you're talking about, they're running your email server too. And your email server implicitly has to have that key to do the signing operation.
And that's a perfect segue into some of the next slides that we can talk about together. One of the things I do want to say before we go into that segue is it will affect your client relationship products. You need to go into your constant contacts, your MailChimps, those types of products, and verify your domains, because you can see this note down here. This is actually from MailChimp. Beginning February 2024, Gmail and Yahoo will require custom authentication. This is DMARC record for anyone sending more than 5,000 emails. So if you're sending emails out to your customers and you are sending a lot in a 24-hour period, you need to make sure that your DMARC records are updated and ready to go. And that is definitely something that's important for some of the statewide nonprofits and statewide organizations that are sending out and constantly communicating with their clients. But getting back to the segue, you know, we talked about the SPF record first, and this is what an SPF record actually looks like. And this is what Google says, but this is what is in our email hosting provider. And so talk to us about the difference of that, Chris, you know, what Google says, because versus what is in my hosting provider.
Okay. Well, what Google is saying there, the blue record includes spf.google.com. Now, what that is that's including all of the servers that Google maintains in a separate record that they may use on the outbound side. And those servers would be represented either as additional, they could be additional includes, so it can be nested, but usually as IP addresses or blocks of IP addresses. So what that's saying from Google is here are all of our addresses, which we maintain in this record _spf.google.com. If the message comes from any of those, it's legitimate. Now, what's on your provider, which is the black text on the left, is including something entirely different. And that too expands into a nested DNS smart host, expands into a nested set of other domains and IP addresses that it recognizes. And the two don't intersect usually. So that's why you get the mismatch. It says the server is not in alignment.
So that's exactly why that's this DMARC alignment right here that you're talking about, because those two records don't match.
Okay. I don't have a good way to fix that because Google won't cooperate. They will not change their behavior, and they won't give you the other way to fix that is to have a CNAME reference to say, well, this is equivalent to the domain that I'm using. And that would resolve, but they won't do that either. So, and fixing it from your side is difficult because Google's set of servers can change at any time. So you need to basically, the only thing that you can do is kind of squishy, which is you can include the same thing that Google includes into your record manually. So you punch into your list of things in the black text record below. You add either before or after the DNS smart host entry, you add the google.com entry, and it
Okay.
should override that and allow that in. But again, it when Google changes things, they change things on a big scale. They're not shy about it, and sometimes they change their where their SPF records are too. So you have to kind of keep up with it.
Okay. So if your
The
email
sim-
suddenly gets a lot of bounce backs, check this. I mean, check
Yeah.
what Google is saying, check if Google changed something, or Microsoft. You know, you could intersect. Microsoft changes things too. And then go back in and make sure that your SPF record has both references.
Right.
Okay.
The way that SPF records work is they're processed from left to right. So the first term there at SPF1 just tells you what it is. The ones after that, the each record evaluates and returns a result, either none or neutral, to say that there's been no finding either way. None would only come back if it didn't find the record as a result. But some of these will come back and say neutral. Some of them will return a result of pass.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned soft fail, and then there's perm error is another common one, which means it failed. So pass, fail, soft fail, perm error, and I think there's a temp error, but I never actually see it. But each one of those terms with a plus in front of it or the include, they will return a result, and it keeps processing these elements until it gets a hard pass or a hard fail, one way or the other. And the last term, the all term, will match anything. So if none of the terms return a result, that all is the catch-all. And the little tilde on there, the little squiggly character, that tells it that you will soft fail on that term.
Okay.
So that's the catch-all.
Okay.
Plus indicates you'll match on a pass, if any of those are true, and a minus instead of a plus on those terms would say fail if it matches any of these.
Okay.
So that's how you interpret it.
So this is what it looks like on our SiteGround, our email hosting provider. This is how we've set up our SPF record. And you can see that the DKIM is another tab. Bluehost is the same, is similar. GoDaddy is similar. All of these are very similar. And so this is just kind of what they generate like Chris was saying earlier, they generated that record for me. I did not have to do it myself. But it's still, and then it's set to soft fail. So that's why it came up on LearnDMark like that. And I think it's helpful to see the hosting screens, because that record makes more sense in this case, because you know where to put that in. But there's other, you go out to the cPanel on Bluehost and you see the C name, which is what Chris mentioned. And so there's other options. SiteGrounds is a little more simplistic because they do a lot for you in the background, which is also, partially a problem if Google changes everything for us. Because they may not have kept up with all the Google changes. I'm sure they pay a couple people to do that, if not more. But at the same time, Google could be changing things and they may not know about it. There's another tool out there called MX Toolbox, and this is one that was also recommended to me. It's like LearnDMark, and you can go out and check. And it gave different, after we made a few changes, we went back in and used MX Toolbox to double check some of the changes that we had done. And sure enough, it passed on MX Toolbox. So it was kind of a neat, it was kind of another neat way to do this double check. And I liked this tool. And what I would recommend to a lot of you in the audience is, before you talk to an expert, go out to Learn DMARC or go out to MX Toolbox and check your records, and then bring that data to an expert to help you translate it, just like I did with Chris. Chris, do you want to mention anything about MX Toolbox and what you like and don't like about it?
I don't know. There are a profusion of such tools. A lot of times, your ISP will generate and validate a lot of this stuff pretty well for you. I've used MX Toolbox, but not recently. So no, not anything particular.
Okay. Our Google servers, there's another one that's a Google Apps Toolbox that will also check your domain for your different records. And what I found when I was double checking this after we did make some changes is that some were a little bit different. And a lot of them said, wait 24 hours or 48 hours and then check, because it's propagating from server to server to server every time you make a change. And I didn't know that it wasn't just instant, but that does make sense that they have lots of servers out there. So what we did change, once we finally did change our SPF record, the bounce back stopped, which was nice. And then we did change our DKIM record a little bit too. Google and MX Toolbox said it wasn't set up, but it was set up in SiteGround. So we just waited for that to propagate, and then it came back and it was okay later. And that was through SiteGround's DNS zone editor. I do believe that in like Bluehost and GoDaddy, you might be able to look for that DNS zone editor or something similar to find these records, but you can see there's these records here. Do you want to talk about these types of records here, Chris, a little bit?
Well, sure. A records and 4A records, it's showing over there, are basically IP address records. They are a pointer from your domain name, cyberwyoming.com. They point to a server, basically, that's associated with that. Usually there are multiple subdomains or something for handling different kinds of services that may point to different actual physical addresses, or physical is the wrong word these days in the cloud world. The CNAME record is short for canonical name. Canonical name is the most basic representation of the domain name, and it is basically a reference from one domain name to another. So at least theoretically, if Google would do it, you could have a pointer from a Google domain pointing to CyberWyoming, so that one of those servers would appear to be CyberWyoming, or would be dereferenced that way for resolution. MX records are called mail exchange records, and they do kind of the converse of what SPF does. They contain a list of servers to which mail can be sent for your domain. So when somebody, on the other side of sending is receiving, obviously, and when somebody sends to an address at CyberWyoming, they need to look that up someplace and see, okay, where is their mail server? That gives them the valid entry points from a domain point of view, not an IP address point of view, but it gives them the server domain name for where they can send that. SRV records are they're service records, and they're actually seldom used. I think they might actually be deprecated for some uses at this point. And then text records they're not considered to be for any specific purpose. They were originally included in DNS, and DNS goes back to the 90s. They were included in DNS to be human readable records, but all of the things, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, all communicate using text records. So, and there are a whole bunch of other things as well. So they are truly used to convey real protocol.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for explaining those. I appreciate it.
Almost every cloud provider will have something like a DNS zone editor, sometimes a simplified approach to that. And sometimes they'll give you a double-edged razor blade with no, no safeties on it too. So you have to be careful.
Definitely read. I mean, if you're with GoDaddy or Bluehost or whoever's hosting your email, make sure you read their documentation first. And if you're nervous about it, talk to an expert. I mean, that's what I kept finding out is I needed help doing this. I know enough to be dangerous, but I definitely don't know enough to actually feel comfortable changing records.
The terminology of zone editor, by the way, comes from the granddaddy of DNS servers, bind. Bind calls what you store all that information in the zone file. And that terminology has persisted, even though we don't really refer to them as zones formally in DNS. That terminology comes from that product.
Okay, cool. So we already talked about the DKIM record, but I do want to show you that, some of the things that we set up because our DKIM record was set up on SiteGround, but it wasn't being, recognized on some of the other toolboxes that we were checking. We did a little bit of research and we found some really interesting information on it. We changed a few things and ended up, adding a couple of C names, and by the end of the C names, we were able to get everything figured out and with some text records and some C names. And do things still bounce back occasionally? Yes, but I don't consider it our setup issue anymore. It might be, what Chris was saying with Google. And so every once in a while, I am now going out and checking MX Toolbox. But if I add this K3 in for the DKIM lookup, it always passes. And so that's kind of what I've been up to. What I found out there, I didn't realize you had to have a :K3 for it to pass MX Toolbox. And so if you're going back in here and you see that there's this, if you're going into your DNS records and you see that it created a K3 or a K2, make sure you put that into your lookup if you're testing on one of these toolboxes, because that might help figure it out. And I'm not really sure why that works. Why does it work that way, Chris? Do you know? I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't ask you this.
Yeah, that one's a new one on me. What the K3 is?
I don't know.
Yeah,
it just came from the SiteGround. Yeah, it came from what they were using here, and we added it and it worked. And that was from our Google research that we found, and all of a sudden it just came up.
It's probably a some kind of an include that's including a list they maintain somewhere on a subdomain.
Okay. So then we looked at the DMARC record, and if you remember, it wasn't passing. And this is one I talked to you about in quite a bit of time, the DMARC quarantine and reject policy. And I had enabled it and I was getting emails, and I thought it was I didn't know what to do with the emails. And so do you want to talk about that a little bit, Chris? And then it looks like Jason has a question.
Sure.
So after that, I'll bring that up.
DMARC's principal contribution in terms of what allows you to configure is you're allowed to configure a reporting endpoint, a destination for reports, and some things about, I guess the form of those reports, whether they come back individually or consolidated or what have you. Mm-hmm. And my gut recommendation with DMARC at this point is, yeah, you probably need to put a DMARC record out there, but you don't actually have to configure any of these things. If you look up the DMARC record for my company, for example, it has an extremely brief record in there. It just says here, trying to remember what it has. Here, let me, I'll just look it up while we're
Sure, why
looking for it. It just says V DMARC 1, and the P, which is policy, equals none.
Yep. So it's exactly what these tags are here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's the policy equals none here.
Unless you're really into this stuff, I would not do any more than that at this stage in time, because these reports, I have seen cases where people have turned on reports and they have gotten bombarded with them. So, because the internet is a dirty place.
And we had changed ours to quarantine because we thought that would work. And then I was getting the emails and I had no idea what to do with them. So Jason's question is, he's got it set up so he's getting these emails. What should he do anything with them, or what can he do with them?
You know, that's the real question, is how do you pursue that? You know, when you find out someone is spoofing you, who do you contact and what do you do with that? And we've heard a lot of stories about oh, well, you know, the FBI is diving in, the Secret Service is doing this. Most of the time they're doing that for their own reasons. They're on their side, they're not on your side necessarily in even a legitimate breach situation. There are a lot of instances where they come in to help you, but what they're really doing is they're locking down your server room for 6 weeks while they investigate. And that may be someplace you don't necessarily want to tread lightly. So there are a lot of factors to consider, and I'm not convinced that at least small business operators, small organizations can really do anything with this data. It has the potential to overwhelm, and how do you pursue that?
So
good question.
For a while there, I was set to quarantine, and since I'm not Google and I'm not SiteGround, I really don't have the power to fix it anyway, correct?
That's right.
And then, I mean, the best thing I could do is potentially report spoofing to the Federal Trade Commission, because I do have a report fraud option, but who knows what would happen after that. Yeah.
And it, you know, something good might happen or something bad might happen. And you're, you know, what are the expectations? I don't know. Everybody's mileage is going to vary a little bit.
So Jason, did that answer your question, or do you want to come on and keep asking? Yeah, he said it answered his question. Okay, good. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, awesome. So this was just the DMARC record from our hosting provider SiteGround. This is the final record that we put together for SBF, DMARC, and our MX records. And then we had some NS records. And I don't think we talked about NS. What does NS mean?
NS means basically it's looking for a particular kind of DNS record to match.
Okay.
So all of those, an NS record means that it's a legitimate domain, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Straining my brain.
And that makes sense because there's siteground.net here. So
yeah. And MX means any of the servers that are in your MX records, which is something that you have to have in place for email to function anyway today.
Okay.
Back in the old days, you used to be able to do source routing and stuff without that, but these days, no. Pretty much everything goes for an MX record. If it doesn't find it, it'll probably fail.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so after all this work and talking to Chris a couple of times, what did I learn? I learned that if emails were bouncing back, it could be us, or it could be Google and Yahoo, or some of the other large alphabet businesses that I can't, that I can't control. I did learn that, you definitely want your constant contacts of the worlds and those customer service relations. You want those validated, and you want to check those every once in a while. They will notify you if you become unvalidated, but you definitely want to make sure those are validated. And I did kind of I did learn that, if I'm going to go into my email hosting provider, that I would feel more comfortable taking a screen print and talking to somebody like Chris before I messed with those records. So those are the 3 things I learned, but I also learned about some really great free tools that are out there. LearnDmark's the one that Chris talked to us about at the members meeting in February. MX Toolbox I used. There's also a Global Cybersecurity Alliance toolkit, and one of their modules is for small businesses email, and you can run your email address through there, your domain, your website address, and then the Google Apps. If you are a Google small business customer, then you can use Google. There is an equivalent for Microsoft, but I didn't go there because we're not a Microsoft customer. We're a Google email customer. And then the final thing that I really learned was after you go through some of these, call someone like Chris if you need help, because he's knowledgeable, he's friendly, and he's definitely will help you navigate this and see what you can do to fix your email records, if there's anything that you can do. And Chris had some other, when we talk about email security, that none of these records are really that secure. I mean, they're public domain, and they do stuff like validating, but they don't secure or encrypt your email necessarily. So Chris, tell us about some of the products that do protect email.
Well, that's basically it. If you're sending email across the internet, every server that touches has a copy of your email. And all this stuff does really is validate that what goes through is or isn't correct and has or hasn't gone through the right points. It doesn't do anything to secure the content of that email or really even prevent spoofing. It just allows you to detect it. So there's a lot of other stuff happening there. If you really want to have some secure email, what you need to do is pursue a technology like that's what's called an end-to-end encrypted email. OpenPGP is probably the best technology known for that. There's another thing called SMIME, which I've had a lot to do with, and we support in my company. That's secure. MIME is the multi-purpose internet mail extensions. It's how you can send binary content in email, and it goes back to the early 90s. SMIME is the secure MIME standard, and it's a certificate-based digital signature and encryption mechanism that uses the same kind of certificates we use for websites, basically. Both of those are pretty secure technologies. They do have their blind spots, and they're a little bit different.
So when we're talking about these technologies, is this what we're using when we meet in the middle and talk to our doctor on a patient portal, where we get an email that says you have a secure email and you have to go up to a patient portal to get your email, and then you reply on that? And no,
sadly,
that's different.
No.
Okay. So how do these work in relation to that?
There's very little I can say good about patient portals today because most of them are terrible.
That's another topic.
That's another topic. But usually what's going on there is they're just giving you a link to a web page that is behind their login infrastructure, whatever that is. Okay. So it's like most webmail implementations. It's not mail at all that you're going through. It might have gotten to them by mail, but you're not seeing that part of it. So it's really web is what you're talking about there.
So what this does is it truly encrypts your email.
It truly encrypts your email. PGP has been around since the 80s. Okay, it is a truly mature technology. I think it was originally introduced to the public in 1991, and it's become an open standard long since. all of these standards that we're talking about, SPF, DKIM, SMIME, all of them, they come from an outfit called the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IETF. And I've worked with the IETF for many years. I guess at this point I'm what they figuratively call a gray beard. I'm actually starting to become a literal gray beard at this point. The slide says I have 25 years of experience, but I've been working for more like 38 years in the field. So it this stuff kind of grows on you after a while. And
so if you
you
wanted
know
to,
where
if you wanted to implement some of this technology, I mean, is this something a small business owner could do themselves, or is it something they need to call a technology professional to help them with?
you would definitely benefit from some advice. PGP you can do yourself. Most of the email products that are out there will support generating a PGP key and sending PGP. Thunderbird will do it. I think you can do it you can't do it in Outlook natively, but there's an add-in that you can put into Outlook to let you do it. And even some of the webmail systems and Mac OS, I think, will let you do OpenPGP. SMIME, a little less supported because it requires that you go get a certificate to represent your email address. It's not like DKIM where it's the server taking care of it for you. The user is actually signing the email and encrypting the email. So every user has to have a certificate issued for them. And in our company, we do that internally. We run our own public key infrastructure, so it's not a problem for us. But it represents a little bit of a learning curve to how you set up a public key infrastructure, or how you get certificates issued from an existing public authority, which there are many of.
And so those two technologies, those would guard against the man in the middle unless they had the key, right? I mean, it would guard against all of that. And all of those servers that your email is crossing, that it gets stored on, it would be encrypted, so it would be gobbledygook if.
Correct.
Yeah.
There are, with email, there are some residual vulnerabilities that it doesn't deal with, but it's really very good. It's a good place to start. It's worth mentioning the same problem applies to instant messaging. Folks use a lot of things like SMS that they should not be using in 2024. SMS is not just sent in plain text. It is widely harvested by the very people who provide it. The carriers harvest data from that all the time for things, much as your ISP does with your DNS queries. They harvest and sell data based on your activities. So protecting that is in your self-interest from a privacy standpoint. And in a business standpoint, it could actually be a legal matter as well. That you've disclosed something about your customers or about your suppliers that you should not have done.
So there's a question in the chat. For a small business, could a business account from a provider like Proton Mail be beneficial for security?
Yes, Proton Mail has very good marks from me for security. The only thing that I ding it for is it doesn't integrate well with existing email infrastructures. You kind of need to use their tools to get in and out of it. It is all privately encrypted in their servers. They have, I think, you can use their webmail interface, and that always works. And I think they have apps for Android and Apple, and I think they have a what they call a bridge implementation, which lets you use IMAP to access the mailbox. But if you are like I still am, a POP user, post office protocol, you're out in the cold. So it doesn't integrate as well as I'd like. But
so the POP users, my understanding from a small business standpoint is if your email is downloading to your computer, and it's not up on the servers anymore, you're a POP user. If your IMAP, it's still up on the servers and you can access it from anywhere. Is that correct?
that's correct. But the way our business works, we have a server locally and my mail files are on that server. So I have my own layer
You have
of
your own email
portability
server,
behind
yes.
that. And
Because you're an
no,
IT provider and you
it's
know how
not
to do
email.
that.
It's just file services. But
Mhm.
you know, my mail file, when I sit down at this computer, my mail file opens here, and when I sit at a different computer, it opens there.
Okay.
So I don't need the portability they want, and I don't want them to continue to hold that message out there. Whenever anything's in the cloud, it's vulnerable to somebody else's problems. So I'd rather have my own problems, thanks.
So what other questions? We've had two really good questions. What other questions do we have from the audience today that you'd like to ask Chris while we've got him on the phone? We have just a few minutes left. Feel free to either come on or pop it in the chat, whatever you would like to do.
Well, if people are mulling that over, I'll give the sales pitch I usually give for, you know, if you say, well, don't send it over SMS. How should I send it? And the answer is use one of the more secure instant messaging platforms if you're doing that. Signal I like. WhatsApp actually is good, but the only people who can read your messages are Facebook then. So you kind of take that for what it's worth.
I think that's a good point.
SMS, people don't realize there's a layer on top of SMS that's called MMS, multimedia services. And if you ever you should all set your phones not to download an MMS message by default. It's extremely important because 4 different versions of Android have been pwned with malware that way.
That's interesting.
What that protocol basically does is it sends out a URL over SMS, and your phone automatically grabs that URL and downloads what it finds there. And several times it's happened that they found remote code execution vulnerabilities in the Android code that processes that download. So they were able to exploit that and put malware onto phones and things like that. So that's it. Is it, you know, the existing vulnerabilities are fixed? Are there more? That's the $10,000 question. Says for a small business, could a business account from a provider? Oh, I'm reading the old one. I use Signal, Facebook. Owning WhatsApp concerns me. Yeah, Facebook is they're in business to sell your data and to market your data. So, and Telegram is not terribly secure. They've done basically a roll your own encryption, and they resist efforts to do outside cryptanalysis on their work. So it's like your math teacher used to tell you in grade school, show me your work. If you can't see the work, you don't know what they really did. They'll tell you it's secure.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with Chris? Okay, well, thank you, Chris, so much for giving us this lesson today. I've learned something from you every time I talk to you, and I really appreciate you translating this world of acronyms for us, because it seems like this is a heavy area of tech acronyms is
Yeah.
a little confusing, and it sounds like it goes back to the 80s and 90s that we, you know, and they've been building on it. So that makes it even more confusing at times. So thank you so much.
Sure. And I'll invite anybody, you know, if you need some help, reach out to me. You know, it may be something I need to charge you for. It may be something I can just answer for you, and I'm pretty reachable. So
Yeah. Yeah, Chris has been great for us. He's been very helpful. So he's out of Casper. So if you're, you know, if you're in Casper, he'll always have coffee with you. You might see him out and about. So if you're not in Casper, feel free to call him or email him. He's really responsive, and he's been great help for CyberWyoming. We certainly appreciate him. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the recording and leave the meeting. And thank you so much for coming today. Have a great day.
thanks, Laura.